Hello and welcome. So hopefully you enjoyed those new graphics. Today we're going to be talking our way through the eventual 23-man squad that Gareth Southgate should be taking from his initial 33-man training squad. This is another ITSOLO episode, as you can see, and hopefully you enjoyed the graphics. I'll be trying to make sure that the quality of production is increased. Now, starting off, we're going to do a presentation and we're going to see how long it takes us to get through the goalkeepers and defenders. And depending on that length, we may do the midfielders and attackers in this video or in a separate video, just because attention retention and everything. So, I've created this PowerPoint because that's my primary method of introducing anything. And we will move on. So this is the criteria we'll be using. The criteria we're using is talent, and that's a combination of the specific attributes and abilities players might have, the je ne sais quoi that they might have as well, and also the just overall things they bring to the team. Next, we've got form, which is pretty self-explanatory. How well have they performed in the league this year relative to their position? So, for example, one of our key players is normally at the bottom of the table, but because of that, he faces a lot of shots and therefore has a lot of good form down there and managed to keep quite a few good clean sheets. Now, experience. So this is both experience at international and club level. Obviously you need experienced heads, people who won't wilt under pressure, but equally you need people who don't have very bitter experiences, because that might colour the way they perform, a la Harry Kane. Don't worry, he does make the squad. And then just general vibes. So we're talking about, this also feeds off the je ne sais quoi we talked about earlier, as well as just general aura of the player, as well as just how do you feel going into the tournament with this person. The reason I've kept these rather vague is because clearly these are very subjective things, so you can disagree with me. That's totally up to you. That's completely fine. Have a healthy debate down in the comments. I'll be sure to reply to each and every one of you. And yeah, let's get going. So our first person is Jordan Pickford. And I've also got the Footbin stats here, the live stats, just to give us something to look at. So, as you can see, he's had 38 matches this season. He's obviously got none of these, and this doesn't have specific goalkeeping goals. But I would say Jordan Pickford he's quite a talented keeper. He's in quite good form, considering how Everton finished and how many shots they tend to face. He's our most experienced keeper by far. And relatively, I think we have decent vibes with him. Next, we have Aaron Ramsdale, and here we see, I believe Aaron Ramsdale is a more talented keeper than Pickford, but if we go over and see his stats, he's only played about 6 matches this season, and I think that's a big problem. He's not in very good form, he's not got a lot of experience at international level. This should actually probably be down to 2 stars at both international and club level this season, and generally the vibes around Aaron Ramsdale this season are pretty poor. Moving on, we've got Dean Henderson. So I believe he's got quite good talent, having been a backup keeper at United and now the main keeper for Crystal Palace. He's in good form considering the way that Palace ended their season, but he has very little to no experience at international level. I would venture to say he's probably got no international experience, but he's got good vibes. And if we were only allowed to take 2 keepers, I would pick Pickford and Henderson. That kind of spoils it. I would say that I would pick all 3 of these keepers, just because you need a backup and the backup of the backup in case, let's say, Pickford gets a red card and Aaron Ramsdale gets injured. So, moving on. Centre backs. Now, Jared Braithwaite. I believe he's probably one of our brightest future stars, and he probably is one of the brightest sort of talents that England has to offer. I think the way he is able to defend and get in there with the tackles, his positioning is very good, especially considering his age, and he ended the season in a great vein of form. The only knock against Braithwaite is his experience. I think that's something that might come into play. He might get nervous in the big moments. But overall, I think the vibes are pretty high with Branthwaite. We need to have those stats. As you can see, this season he's played 35 matches. He's scored 3 goals as well, and he's only been subbed out once, which suggests that when he's in the game, he stays in the game, and unless there's other reasons, he won't be subbed out. The next player we have is Lewis Dunk, who I was quite surprised made the squad. Brighton have been in a pretty poor run of form. He is probably one of the primary defenders for Brighton, but I would say at age, I believe he's maybe 32, 30, let's just double check on this page. At age 32, yeah. I would say that there's probably not a lot of time left for Lewis Dunk to make the England squad and contribute, but I would say he came into it with middling form. He's got no international experience, and generally, personally, I don't think he has the aura or the vibes to make me feel like this is a guy I want to take forward. Next, we have Joe Gomez. So Joe Gomez has somehow found his way back into a rich vein of form for Liverpool. This is going to play quite importantly into the type of squad and the type of players I value. I believe he's got quite good talent, and he's played himself, like I said, into good form. He's got decent experience, although I don't remember him contributing too much to England's performance. But I would say his key selling point is his utility and his ability to play almost all across the back line wherever you need him. Within a tournament, you need to adapt, and you need to be able to pitch in where you're needed. It might be that our left back, which is a position that we're quite weak in, is a bit weakened, and he can slot in there and do a good enough job. So I think that's a very important feature, and a very important thing that I'm looking for in one of my squad players. Talking like I am Gareth Southgate out here. Next is Mark Gahey. So as you can see, he's not played too much, and he gets subbed in and out a little bit. I think he's one of our most bright young talents in defence, but I feel like maybe this form should actually be bumped up to 3 stars. But his lack of experience makes me feel like he would at most play a bit part, but I think getting some international experiences will be good for him, and I think he can contribute in the future to England's defence. Moving on, we have Ezri Konsa from Aston Villa. Aston Villa clearly overperforming this season, and has contributed greatly to Aston Villa's defence and getting top 4 in Champions League football. A little bit older than Guehi, and I think his vibes and form, I think he could play a bit part, but I would like our backline to be relatively stable throughout the tournament. And as you can see, one of the most concerning features when looking through our defense is that we have very few people who have performed extensively well, especially when you compare them to our midfield and forwards. Moving on to probably one of the more controversial members of the squad, although I don't know why. I personally feel that Harry Maguire is one of, if not the most experienced defenders that we have, and he's certainly one of the players that is favoured by Gareth Southgate. I would say it's unfair, the criticism he sometimes gets. I would say he's quite a talented defender, perhaps just in the wrong system, especially at the start of the season. But like I said, as a solid sort of traditional centre-back, I think Maguire actually performs quite well, especially for England. And I would say that he's played himself into a good run of form. And the United players especially, I would say at the end, winning the FA Cup, and that gives you a boy in sort of your feelings. However, I've only given him 2 stars for vibes because, like I said, quite a controversial figure. Maybe the mentality isn't there, and he just doesn't give good aura to me. Moving on to Jared Quansah. So Jared Quansah has been, I believe he's one of our most bright talents, deputizing for injury-laden squad in Liverpool. I think they maybe petered out a little bit, but I think the fact that he's been included in this 33-man squad and could go to the Euros, I would say might add to his experience. I get good vibes from him. I will say I wouldn't like to see him feature too heavily unless it's sort of as a substitute, perhaps as a reserve member, and being in and around the England squad on international duty. Clearly, the sites I'm using don't track players who are bronze on Footbin, but I would say he's contributed very heavily this season and gained a lot of experience. And I think that we do need young talent. To say what you will about how Gareth Southgate manages, he has managed to bring through a lot of young talent and given them international experience. Moving on, we have Luke Shaw. Now, this is difficult. I would say I've given him 4 stars on talent, and I was umming and ahhing between 3 and 4 stars, because if you remember Luke Shaw's free kick and his goal contributions, I would say Luke Shaw's talent, especially for England, is quite high. Even for Man United, I would venture to say he's probably one of the best fullbacks in the league when he's fit. But that's very much the same as Reece James, who isn't in the 33-man squad, which is he's one of the best fullbacks if he's fit. This is why his form is 1 star and I've given his talent 4 stars. Because what he could give and what he can give when he's on form and when he's playing really well for England and Man United is a lot. However, his form lets him down. I would say he's had a lot of international experience relative, and he's probably one of the only experienced left backs we have who are in the squads. So he kind of has to go. However, given this balance of, his form versus his experience and the injury risks and him just playing himself back in, and the fact he often needs to be subbed out, that's why I've given him 2 star on the vibes. Next, we have one of the shoe-ins, one of the greatest defenders in probably our lifetime, which is John Stones. I would say he definitely has to go. You can see he's a CDM on this card, but he essentially plays this position, and you'll see when we come to doing the England squad and how I think they should set up, you'll find that John Stones is, again, one of these players who is able to deputise, perhaps play this central defensive midfielder, sweeping, sort of a hybrid between a centre-back and your traditional 6. And essentially, I think he's probably one of, if not the most talented defender we have. He's in a good reign of form, having been, champions and the Premier League champions. He's got a lot of international experience, and obviously his vibes are high. Petered a little bit by losing to Manchester United, unfortunately, for them. But I would say he's one of, if not the cornerstone of our defence, and our defence should probably centre around him. And if the team sets up the way I feel like they should set up, he will play a key role. Next, we have Kieran Trippier. Perhaps a surprising addition, but I would say that given that our lack of fullbacks, especially in form and not injured fullbacks, Trippier I think can play a good role. He can switch over to the left if we need him there. He can play on the right. His assist numbers are great. The only problem we have there is he's a little bit leaky in defence, and sometimes he gets caught out, especially for Newcastle. Whether that plays into international football is another question. He has decent amount of international experience, I would say, and as one of our most experienced fullbacks, I would say he has a good chance of making a good contribution to our squad. And then the final player we have is Kyle Walker. I've given him 4 stars for talent. Regardless of what you say, I think our biggest probably challenges in this cup are going to be Germany and France. We'll come on to that when we do our predictions for the bracket. However, you can't deny that Kyle Walker, despite maybe falling off in his pace a little bit as he progresses in his age, he's still one of the only defenders we probably have who might be able to contain a player like Mbappe or the pacey wingers that teams may have. However, I would say his form hasn't been great, and he hasn't played as big a role as an overlapping fullback this season. But again, he's one of, if not the most experienced defenders we have. And if we're going on in England experience, he's probably the only one of our fullbacks who, of our defence, alongside Maguire and perhaps John Stones, who might be able to provide that experience. However, again, his vibes are off just because he's been going through a lot in his personal life, as well as just, He's been a champion, but I would say he's probably not the primary. He's not the Kyle Walker he once was. We'll start with the midfielders. So, Trent Alexander-Arnold has been listed as one of the midfielders, and I think that speaks to the experimentation that Southgate's done, as I believe him to be one of the most talented fullbacks in terms of going forward and providing assists. He's been in an okay run of form, having just come back from injury at the end of the season. He's got a lot of international experience, and I get decent vibes from Trent, and he's got good aura. I would say Conor Gallagher is one of these players. I don't believe him to be the most talented, despite having 3 stars. But the reason that he's got 3 stars is because I think he's talented in the role that we're most lacking, which is a holding midfielder, a traditional holding midfielder. Somebody who can perhaps deputise for Rice if Rice were to be injured, or maybe allow Rice to go forward if that's what we want. He's in a decent run of form, I would say, and especially towards the end of the season, having won 5 games on the bounce before Chelsea decided to sack their manager. But he's not got a lot of international experience, I think. Curtis Jones, unfortunately, I feel like he's one of the players who may not make it into the 26-man squad. He's quite talented, and especially being asked to perform a bigger role this season given Liverpool's injuries, and is in a decent run of form. I think he lacks a bit of international experience, but if we were to take 2 keepers, he would be the first on the list to come back. Now, I can't say enough about Kobe Mainoo. I think Kobe Mainoo is going to be the future of the England squad. I think his talent and just his touch on the ball, his ability to find passes, is one of probably the greatest things going forward that England might have. He's in a rich vein of form, scoring in the FA Cup final and winning the cup at Wembley. That's great experience, but speaking of experience, I feel like he lacks it internationally, at least. However, he's riding on a wave and he's got great vibes. I just hope we don't do to him like we do to too many of our young players and push our expectations all upon him and give him too much pressure and break him. Now, one of the elite talents and one of the key cornerstones to our England squad is Declan Rice. He is probably one of, if not the best holding midfielder in the league, behind Rodri or alongside Rodri. He's in a rich vein of form. He has a decent amount of England experience and international and competition experience, and I haven't been updating the stats as we've been going along. So this is Conor Gallagher's stats. They didn't track it. This is Curtis Jones. This is Kobe Mainoo. But this is Declan Rice. He's played pretty much every single game he can play, and I would say that he is one of the players who definitely has to feature and will feature in the starting 11. And then finally, Adam Wharton, who I think was a surprise addition to the 33-man squad. I think he had a great end to the season, especially with Crystal Palace's uptick in form. However, his lack of experience and the fact that I think one great performance shouldn't really put you above the rest of the players who are going to be missing out. And especially the dearth of talent that we have in our forward position, I think unfortunately Adam Wharton is somebody I would cut. And finally we come to the forwards. So first player is Jude Bellingham, obviously one of the greatest talents, obviously is going to make the first squad. I would say he's probably one of our premier talents. He's been in good form, having just won the Champions League. I will say, however, his performance wasn't great in the Champions League, both in the final and semi-final, and I feel like he needs to prove himself under pressure. He's not had a lot of international experience, so I'm just worried that that might play into it, but generally I think the vibes are good with him. Next is Jared Bowen, having been one of the premier pieces of West Ham's season. I feel like Jared Bowen has earned his place. He provides the pace that we sorely lack, and I feel like especially as somebody who maybe comes on as a sub and an impact substitute, he's in great form. He's lacking a little bit of international experience, but I think he could play key parts. Another player I feel that is going to just be playing small parts would be Eberechi Eze. He's played quite often for Crystal Palace and has contributed, and there's a lot of interest in him this summer. I would say he's probably one of the greatest young talents that's, especially one of the winger talents that we have, forward talents, but he lacks a lot of international experience. So I would say he probably is likely to maybe play a reserve role, perhaps an impact sub role from time to time. Phil Foden, I feel like is nothing needs to be said really about Phil Foden. Premier League winner, probably the best player of the season in the Premier League. An immense talent, in great form, maybe lacking a lit, and I've put his experience at 3 stars, not because he lacks international experience, but I just feel like he hasn't performed as well internationally as he does for his club. Maybe that's the systems that he's been trying to be played into, but I think he's coming off of elite vibes, and I feel like he should make a key contribution to England's Euro run. Next is Jack Grealish. Now, Jack Grealish, I think, has had, unfortunately, his love for football beaten out of him by the Pep Guardiola system. Hasn't featured as much as he had in previous seasons this season, saying season too much. And he's not really in a great vein of form. As you can see, 6 goal contributions this season in the Premier League. He also, I feel, he performs quite well internationally, but his finishing leaves a lot to be desired. And given how elite the squad is in the forward position, I feel like he may not feature as much. The next player who's made the squad is Anthony Gordon. Elite. I put him as an elite talent, 4 stars or above talent, because I feel like his pace is something we will need, especially on that left-hand side. Given the notable absence of Marcus Rashford, which I believe might be the correct decision given how his season went. I feel like, perhaps as a third choice, maybe you could justify Rashford, but I think Gordon's more than earned his place this season. However, his lack of experience may hinder him a little bit. Next, Harry Kane obviously makes the squad. Probably, if not, in my opinion, the greatest striker in the world currently. In a rich vein of form, despite Bayern Munich's struggles this season. It wasn't Kane that was struggling. He's breaking records in the Bundesliga. He is our sort of captain. He's got the most experience, and he has elite vibes, I think, in an England shirt. Next, James Maddison. I think he started off the season hot, then he had that injury, and he's come back. At most, I feel he'll be an impact sub, perhaps in the attacking midfield position, bring some creativity if he was stagnating a little bit. I feel like he is there for good vibes. I feel like he won't play too big a role, but who knows? Perhaps that link up with Kane might be something that comes to pass in the Euros. Next is Cole Palmer. I think it's a breakout season for Cole Palmer. We see his talent. We probably feel like Man City should rue the day they sold him, to be honest, to Chelsea. He's in a rich vein of form. The only thing against him is his lack of experience at international levels, but he's on elite vibes and clearly makes the squad. Next is Saka. Now, you might be surprised that I've given him 2-star for vibes, and that's not a hit on him. I've put him as a 5-star talent. I believe he should be the starting right winger. But I feel like we are running him into the ground. More specifically, I feel like Arsenal are running him into the ground. He's played too many games, and he's had two grueling back-to-back seasons, playing almost every single game, every single minute of every single game. And he's come second twice. That takes an emotional toll. And he plays every international game as well. Sorry if you can hear the helicopter in the background. And I would say he's had a great season, but perhaps not his greatest season by his own standards. He's accumulated a lot of experience in this time, but my vibes are we should rest him and perhaps use him as an impact sub rather than the starting winger. Let me know if you disagree. Now, you can see by the stars I've given this player, I don't think Ivan Toney should make the squad. He hasn't particularly contributed to Brentford's season upon his return. He's not particularly in a good run of form. He has very little international experience. I think the vibes are maybe a 1-star. I was just trying to be nice by giving him 2. I think he is a good goal scorer. I think he's a good striker. But the next player and Cole Palmer and Phil Foden and Harry Kane all play his position probably better and are in better form, I think. So I don't think he makes the squad. And finally, Ollie Watkins. He, again, I think has made a great case for himself and deserves to go on the plane to Germany. He is, I think, making the most of his talents. He's in a rich vein of form. He lacks a little bit in international experience, but I think his vibes are quite good. So, my final squad, this is what we have. Notably, I'll just list off the players that I'm thinking of I feel shouldn't go and that I would therefore be cutting. So, let me just make this a little bit bigger so that people can see. So, my final squad, I'll just move this to the side a little bit. My final squad is this. The players that I wouldn't be taking with me I'm taking 2 keepers, so I'm leaving Ramsdale and Trafford, and I didn't even talk about Trafford. From the goalkeepers, I'm leaving Lewis Dunk and Mark Gahey, Curtis Jones unfortunately for him, and Adam Wharton and Ivan Toney. Those are the 7 players I would cut to make the 26-man squad. Now, if I'm honest, if I had to cut this down even further, I would probably not take Konsa, Wansa, and then perhaps Madison and Eze as 4 extra players. So if I had to make a 22-man squad, for example. And here's a sneak preview of who I feel should be the starting 11. And catch you guys next time for that video. Peace.